The lockbox sat on my kitchen table for 11 days before I opened it. My son told me it was empty. He said my wife had probably used it for old receipts or expired coupons, the kind of junk she could never bring herself to throw away. He even laughed a little when he said it, a small laugh, the kind you use when you want someone to feel foolish for hoping. I almost believed him. My wife passed on a Thursday morning in early November. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and cruel, the way that kind always is. We had 8 weeks from diagnosis to the end, and most of those weeks she spent either sleeping or holding my hand and telling me things she wanted me to remember. The name of her doctor at the women's clinic in Clarksburg. The combination to the safe in the closet, which neighbor had borrowed our extension ladder and never returned it. She never mentioned the lockbox. I found it 3 days after the funeral, tucked behind winter coats on the top shelf of the hall closet. It was a small steel thing, olive green, the kind they sell at hardware stores for about $12. It had a combination lock, not a key. My wife's handwriting was on a piece of masking tape on the bottom. It just said, "For you. Only you." My son was staying with us that week, us meaning me and my younger daughter, Penny, who had driven up from Savannah to help with arrangements. My son lived 40 minutes away in Morgantown with his wife, Rochelle. He'd been in and out all week, helpful in the way people are helpful when they're also watching for things. When I brought the lockbox downstairs, he looked at it the way you look at something you've already decided is worthless. "What's the combination?" he asked. "Don't know yet. You want me to just break it open? I've got bolt cutters in the truck." I told him no. He shrugged and went back to his coffee. That night after he left, Penny sat with me at the table and we tried numbers. My wife's birthday, mine, our anniversary, the year we bought the house. Nothing worked. I set it aside and went to bed. I didn't sleep much. I lay in the dark and thought about my wife, about the way she used to sit at the kitchen table in the mornings with her hands wrapped around her mug, not drinking, just warming her hands. I thought about what she'd said to me 3 weeks before she died, during one of her clearer afternoons. She told me to be careful. I'd asked her what she meant. She'd looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "Just be careful, Ray." She only called me Ray when something was serious. My name is Raymond, and most people called me that. But when she said Ray, I paid attention. I thought about that for a long time in the dark. On the 4th day, Penny was packing up some of her mother's books when she found a small index card tucked inside a paperback on the nightstand. My wife read a lot of mystery novels. This one was worn at the spine, clearly read more than once. The index card had 5 numbers on it. No explanation. The lockbox opened on the first try. Inside was a manila envelope, sealed with a strip of packing tape. Under the envelope was a USB drive, the small kind, barely longer than a thumbnail, and a folded piece of paper with my name on it in my wife's handwriting. I opened the paper first. It said, "I've known something was wrong for almost 2 years. I didn't say anything because I couldn't prove it and because I was afraid of what would happen to you if I was wrong. Now I'm running out of time, so I did the only thing I could think of. Everything is in the envelope. Take it to someone you trust, not family, a lawyer, or the police. Please don't let them talk you out of it. I love you. You always trusted me. Trust me one more time." I read it 4 times. My hands were steady. I don't know why. Maybe by that point I'd already cried out everything I had. Penny was still in the bedroom. I didn't call her. I sat alone at the kitchen table and opened the envelope. They were bank statements. Not ours. Or not just ours. They were statements from a joint account I'd never known existed, opened in my name and my son's name at a credit union in Fairmont. Going back 3 years, there were deposits. Regular ones, the kind that don't attract attention, ranging from $800 to $2,200, made every few weeks. There were also copies of documents I recognized but shouldn't have seen in that context. A quitclaim deed for a property in Bridgeport, a promissory note, a power of attorney form with my signature on it, dated 14 months ago, on a day I had no memory of signing anything. My wife had printed out everything. She'd organized it into sections with paper clips. She'd made notes in the margins in her small, precise handwriting. Who is Stonegate Holdings, LLC? And check this address. It's the old Hartley building. Commercial property, and his signature doesn't match the others. Look at the R. She had been investigating our own son. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the coffee to go cold. Long enough for the light to shift in the kitchen. Penny eventually came in and found me at the table. The papers spread in front of me, and she stood in the doorway and looked at my face and didn't ask a single question. She just sat down next to me and waited. I slid the letter across the table to her. She read it slowly. When she finished, she set it down and smoothed it flat with both hands. The way you do when you need to do something with your hands, because there's nothing to say. Does he know she knew? She asked finally. I don't think so. What do you want to do? I looked at the stack of papers and my wife's handwriting in the margins, at the USB drive sitting next to my coffee cup. I want to know what's on that drive, I said. We found a laptop, my wife's old one, from before she got sick, and we plugged in the drive. There were folders, named by date going back nearly 4 years. Inside were photographs, screenshots of text messages, a document that appeared to be meeting notes written in my wife's hand and then scanned, and a folder labeled simply Stonegate that contained incorporation documents for a limited liability company registered in West Virginia. The registered agent was my son. The other member listed on the operating agreement was a man I didn't recognize, a name I'd never heard, with an address in Parkersburg. I stared at the incorporation date. It was 11 months before my wife's diagnosis. She'd found this, or part of it, before she got sick. She'd kept quiet, kept collecting, kept waiting. And then the cancer came and she'd run out of time to wait. The next morning, I called a lawyer, not the one our family had used for years. That man had done the closing on our house and handled my wife's estate paperwork, and I no longer knew what I could trust. I found a different one, a woman in Clarksburg who handled civil litigation. Her name was on a referral list from the County Bar Association. I brought everything, the lockbox, the envelope, the USB drive. I brought the letter my wife had written. The lawyer's name was Sharon. She was maybe 50, brisk, but not unkind, and she spent 2 hours going through every page before she said anything. When she did, she spoke carefully. The power of attorney, she said, is either forged or was signed under circumstances that could constitute undue influence. If you have no memory of signing it, and we can get a handwriting expert involved, that's a significant problem for whoever is holding it. My son, I said. She nodded. The LLC appears to have been used to receive and redistribute funds from real estate transactions, at least 2 of which involve property that either you or your wife had an interest in. Based on what I can see here, there may be more we haven't found yet. What does that mean? It means, she said, setting down the papers and folding her hands, that this is potentially fraud. Possibly elder financial abuse, which carries its own statutes in West Virginia. And depending on what's on those real estate transfers, there could be criminal exposure as well. I drove home that afternoon in the kind of quiet that has weight to it. The trees along Route 50 were bare by then. Everything looked stripped down to its structure. Just branches and sky, no softening anywhere. I didn't call my son. I didn't tell him anything was wrong. He called me 2 days later, which he did most weeks. We talked for about 15 minutes. He asked how I was eating. He asked if I'd thought about selling the house now that his mother was gone. He said he'd been talking to a realtor, not pushy about it, just mentioning it, the way he'd been mentioning things for the last couple of years. Little nudges, little plants. I said I hadn't decided anything yet. He said he understood. He said there was no rush. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen with the phone on the table in front of me, and I thought about every conversation we'd had in the last 3 years. I thought about the times he'd brought paperwork for me to sign and told me it was routine. I thought about the afternoon 2 Januaries ago, when he'd driven me to a notary in Bridgeport for something he said was related to a refinance that never made sense to me. I hadn't asked enough questions. I trusted my son. My wife had trusted me to stop trusting him once she was gone. The investigation took 4 months. Sharon worked with a forensic accountant, a woman from Charleston who specialized in financial fraud, and together they reconstructed what my son and his partner had been doing. The short version, they had used the forged power of attorney to transfer a commercial parcel my wife and I owned jointly into Stonegate Holdings, then immediately listed it for lease. The lease income, a little over $3,000 a month, had been flowing into the LLC's account for 16 months. They had also borrowed against the equity in a small rental property my wife had inherited from her parents, using documents in my name, and used those funds to capitalize what appeared to be a separate investment scheme. The total was just over $240,000. When the sheriff's investigator called to tell me they were prepared to move forward, I was standing at the kitchen sink, washing a single coffee cup. I turned off the faucet and stood there dripping water on the floor and said, "Okay, do what you need to do." They arrested my son on a Tuesday morning. He was at work. His wife called me that afternoon, screaming. She said I had betrayed my own family. She said his mother would be ashamed of me. She said he'd only been trying to protect my finances because I didn't know how to manage them myself. I let her finish. Then I said, "My wife left me a letter. She knew what he was doing. You might want to talk to a lawyer." She hung up. Penny drove up from Savannah that weekend. We sat on the back porch with coffee even though it was cold, bundled in coats, and she asked me if I was all right. I thought about it honestly before I answered. "I miss your mother," I said. "I know. I keep wanting to tell her she was right." Penny was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "She knew she was right. That's why she left you everything." My son was charged with financial exploitation of an elderly person, forgery, and 2 counts of fraudulent transfer of real property. His partner in Parkersburg was charged separately. They had done similar things to 2 other men, one of them in his 80s, a widower in Weston who hadn't even known his name was on an LLC. My son accepted a plea agreement, 42 months with restitution ordered. The property transfers were reversed through civil proceedings. Most of the lease income was recovered through the LLC's accounts, which had been frozen early in the investigation. The other victims, the man in Weston and a retired schoolteacher in Elkins, whose late husband's property had also been involved, received restitution as part of the same agreement. I want to say that clearly because I know people wonder. The money was returned. Not all of it, not perfectly, but most of it. Sharon and the forensic accountant made sure of that. They were thorough. There is a question I've never fully answered, even to myself. At sentencing, my son looked at me from across the courtroom, not with anger. He looked the way he used to look as a boy when he'd done something wrong and he knew it. Ashamed, small, genuinely sorry, or something that looked like that. I sat in the first row behind the prosecutor's table, and I looked back at him, and I felt nothing that I expected to feel. Not satisfaction, not grief, not even anger by that point. Just an enormous, exhausted emptiness, the kind that follows a very long effort. I go to this cemetery every Sunday. My wife's grave is under a pin oak that will be beautiful in another 10 years when it fills out properly. I bring coffee sometimes, because she always said a cemetery without coffee was just sad for no reason, and she was not a person who believed in sadness without reason. I talk to her. I tell her how Penny is doing. I tell her about the neighbor's dog who got into my garden again. Small things. The kind of things that keep a life running. And I tell her that I did what she asked. That I took it to someone I trusted. That I didn't let them talk me out of it. She always knew me better than I knew myself. She knew that if she told me directly, I might have hesitated. I might have made excuses for him. She knew I needed to find it myself, to sit alone at that table with the papers spread in front of me and reach my own conclusion. That was the last thing she ever did for me. She didn't protect me from the truth. She made sure I was ready to hear it. I don't know what the right word is for what she did. Planning seems too cold. Love seems too simple. I think it was something in between. A stubborn, clear-eyed, unglamorous love that just kept going even when she couldn't anymore. The lockbox is on the shelf in my office now. I keep it there because I want to remember that small and ordinary things can hold what matters most. if you let them. Her handwriting is still on the bottom. For you. Only you. That's still true.